And we're going to take a few things a little bit out of order this evening because we have a special guest. And so Sophie's going to do a manager update at the beginning. Go for it.
Right. So I don't know if I'll end up doing one at the end too, Cindy, so that I don't take up a lot of the meeting. But, you know, when Dick Ranigan's name pops up on my email, it's always good news. And he's usually trying to tell me that we might be in a place where we should be looking at refinancing our bonds that he helped us issue in 2014. So late last week, Dick's name popped up, and he thought that we could save almost $500,000 in interest payments, refinancing our debt, which is great news. The other thing that he's done for us is we're not spreading the debt for more years. I think there's one that's 1 year, but we're not adding lots of time to it, which is kind of important. The savings that he showed us was considerable, and it got me to have a phone call with him. And one of the things that we talked about was, number one, wanting to get back in touch with you to talk about the market and take the council's temperature on refinancing. And two, we talking with both Joe and Rob, there are a couple of infrastructure projects that we can easily identify as kind of creating a log jam in our infrastructure funding. And talking to Dick, with rates that are south of 2%, this might be the time to bond for those couple of projects and pay it back over time and allow us to get on to the rest of the infrastructure plan. So what I'd like to do, Dick and I are not prepared to talk to you about the specifics of refunding. We want to know what your general appetite would be to even look at it, because it will take some heavy lifting on both of our parts to get those numbers for you. Happy to do it, but we don't want to do it if your thought is this is not the time for us to add debt. So with that, I want to pass it along to Dick to talk just a little bit about the current market and where you see this heading.
Great, thanks, Sophie. Can you hear me okay? I got a nod, yes. As Sophie said, we continually look at all of our issuers to see if the market is appropriate to take a look at refinancing. And in our nomenclature, we call it refunding. There are two types of refundings. One's a current refunding, one's an advanced refunding. And I won't get into a lot of detail there, but this includes both. For those loans that are callable or prepayable without penalty today, we can do those on a tax-exempt basis. So that is what we're proposing to do with the outstanding USDA loan. On those bonds that aren't prepayable today, but they're callable or prepayable sometime in the future, which are the 2014 bonds, those are callable 10 years after we issued them in 24, we would propose to do an advance refunding. The feds, in their infinite wisdom about 4 years ago, removed from our tool belt the ability to do tax-exempt advance refundings. So that portion of the new financing would be done taxable. So it's a little bit more complicated than the typical transaction that we do, but we put the two pieces together. So we have a taxable piece, a tax-exempt piece. The bottom line, as Sophie said, last week it was about 10 days ago, it was about $530,000. I'm just talking cash savings versus net present value. And today, when we ran the numbers, it actually increased about 80,000, the savings that is, to about 619,000. Keeping it at, as Sophie and I talked to in more general terms today, that is net of issuance costs. Obviously, there's cost to put this all together, be it legal fees and my fee and the underwriter's costs and the ratings that we have to get from Moody's and Standard & Poor's. And we have a budgeted line item in there, but this savings that I quote is net of those. So that comes out of the savings, and you get today over $600,000 in savings spread over the remaining useful life of those bonds. Sophie mentioned that one looked to be a little bit longer than another. I think that's fiscal year maybe versus calendar year. We will not extend term, and we will not increase par value of bonds. Those were authorized, and we will not exceed those parameters. We'll stay under those parameters. So we'll issue fewer bonds for no longer than was originally authorized. So it's really taking what's there and just dropping the interest rate. The interest rate on the USDA loan, for instance, averages 3 1/8, 3.12%. We're looking at refinancing those and the bonds that are existing from 2014 at about 2.1% with the cost in there. So drop interest rates from 3% to 2%, everyone can do the math. I'm going to save a lot of money, just as you would do with your house loan. At some point, it makes sense. You might take a look and say, gee, if rates drop 1/4 of a point, it's not enough for me to go through all of the machinations of refinancing the house. But boy, if they drop 1%, I'm going to take a good hard look at that because it's worth my time and effort and chance that the market will move, which it will, up and or down, between now and when we price the bonds. And so what we have today is a savings of 4% of the existing outstanding bonds. The tried and proved benchmark is if you can save 3%, do it. We're at a 4% level, so it's clearly a green light if the town wants to do it. Question always comes up, and I don't have one. What is your magic ball in front of you say, your crystal ball, as to where rates are going to go? I don't know. And I'd be foolish to try to guess with everything that's going on in this lovely world of ours today, be it local, be it national or international. For all of those reasons, the market is always a moving target. Suffice it to say, it's in a good place right now. It appears that, as far as we can see, it's probably going to remain so, hopefully, until we can get the process done. Another major question that comes up that's going to be on and should be on everyone's mind is, well, what about, because we went through this, we started the process a while back and then we stopped because interest rates went the wrong way. What happens if we get involved in this and the rates do go the wrong way? The out-of-pocket cost of the town is going to be time and effort by your bond counsel until the point to where we get the rating. So up until that point, it's pretty minimal. It's going to be Councilor Bragg's time, Attorney Bragg's time in putting together the necessary items for you to have agenda items, public hearing, bond orders, refunding orders, whatever he puts together for you to adopt, and his time and effort in researching this with us. And then at that point, we have engaged the rating agencies, and until we get through that process, there's no cost there. So we can get fairly well down the road with minimal costs before we have to make a decision, go or no go. I'm not paid, the underwriter's not paid, the printer's not paid, the paying agent's not paid. All of those players that are in the financing aren't paid until things are consummated or certainly well on their way. So I think it behooves the town to say, let's go forward and watch it day by day as we do the rates. And as long as it makes sense, is to move forward with the refinancing.
Thank you. Can you tell me what a prepayable, you said a prepayable bond, is that what does
Right.
that mean?
You might know that some loans are prepayable and others are not. The USDA loans are prepayable. In other words, you can pay me off with the USDA and refinance it, or just pay off the USDA at any time. Now they say that they're on an interest payment date or whatnot. In working with the USDA, they're happy to get out of the loan business. They even tell you when they make a USDA loan to you initially, if you can refinance the thing, do it. Because then they can turn around and reloan that money to somebody else. In the case of bond issues, there's a call date. In other words, a date in which you can refinance it. In a 20-year issue, there's a call date at 10 years. The 2014 bonds have a call date in 2023 or 2024 in which we can call those bonds. So we're going to refinance them, but they're not callable yet. So that's when we do an advance refunding. And we go through an escrow where money is put in escrow and invested, and we'll pay those bonds off until we can call them. And we will call them then at a date in the future. Those investments are verified by what's called a verification agent. It's a specialized CPA firm. We use one out of Denver, Colorado, who does most of them in the country. Name of it's Causey, Demkin, and Moore. And they take all the numbers that we put on these sheets that you see, and they take a look at all of that, and they say, yes, this works, or no, it doesn't. And they will opine to that it does work. And it's placed in escrow, and they test it. And so you're guaranteed that the money will be there in 2024 to do what we say we'll do. So going back, the 14 bonds aren't callable or prepayable today. They are in 24.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments?
My assumption is that if council was happy to look at starting the process to refinance when we had a fraction of the savings, you're going to be even happier now to do that. The question that I have is talking with Rob and Joe, the College Heights Chapel drainage project, which is estimated to be between $400,000 and $500,000. And Rob calls it the Mahaney development. I think the only place that exists is if you are a person who's been in town for a very long time. For the rest of us, it's the Frost Lane development up behind the school. They have a major drainage issue, which is also causing an infiltration issue for WPCF. So it is on our WPCF combined sewer overflow master plan that has been accepted by the DEP. So we do not have a number for Joe yet or Rob for that project, but it is like a firm number. The placeholder right now is 400,000 for each. I would like to go ahead, if you guys are interested in looking at bonding for those infrastructure projects, I would look at getting a budget estimate from our engineer to be able to move forward, because we can't just pick a number, because Rob says Rob's great, but that doesn't normally keep people happy when we're borrowing money. And then borrow for those two projects. What Rob is thinking is those two projects equate, it's kind of like what we ended up doing with North Main Avenue, where one project ate up the lion's share of our infrastructure capital funds. And he thinks with those two, it would put us in a place to be able to better manage the more routine paving and maintenance projects that we have. So I don't want to redirect Rob and Joe from what they're doing unless this is something that the council wants to consider. If you do, then we can put together a nice presentation and package, but otherwise we would just move forward with the refunding.
Sophie, my feeling is that I'd like to see the refinancing, because $600,000 is a lot of money. And I'd kind of like to see the numbers on what these projects would cost and where we would stand before making a final decision. If anybody else has any other comments or questions.
I would agree with Cindy's comments. I think the refinancing is a no-brainer as long as the interest rates stay approximately where they are today. And I would like to see the numbers on the additional projects. I think if we don't do something like that with those two projects, our infrastructure plan is going to be behind for years.
I agree with both Cindy and Tom. In fact, I think a lot of our infrastructure plan are gaining some years in the age. I remember the College Heights plan back when I lived on it. That was 5 years ago. So, yeah, and I'd like to, looking at the possible bond with the numbers for this sort of thing, it'd be nice to see what that impact will be.
Great. Does that give you enough direction, Sophie?
So my thought is that we are planning to have a special meeting next Monday with the Penobscot Nation at 4. If we had a workshop after that, we could go through the numbers at that point. Dick has also said that he'll be able at that point to provide me with amortization schedules for the fund impacts, correct, Dick?
That's correct.
Because that 600,000 is across 3 different funds, general fund, TIF funds, and WPCF. So we want to look to be able to show you how we would manage that, because I think it will take a little bit of managing, either in the structuring of the bonds or in how we choose to make our annual repayment. And then at that point, I could also have Rob and Joe available to talk about the projects so that you would have a better sense of what it would mean for the longer term plan. That works for you.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Sounds good.
And just to clarify, once we start this, Dick's going to tell us when we're getting to the point of actually creating bills, that sizable bills that would need to be paid. And he's going to keep an eye on the market for us. And we'll continue to watch this, but it doesn't seem as volatile as it was back in March.
Right.
Dick did a great job last time of telling us when to pull out, so.
We will give you hopefully plenty of warning. And just to follow along on the new projects, one reason why you should consider them now is that they can be added to this refunding as what we call new money projects. And the issuance cost on those are going to be very minimal because we've got all the issuance costs already built in. So for little money, you can do these projects, and so the financing costs are almost nil. The interest rate, again, I sold an issue 3 weeks ago for the city of Augusta at just over 1.5%. It was weighted more to the shorter end, but we're certainly under a 2% market on tax exempt. So when you look at borrowing for new money projects, which would be tax exempt, this is a good time. I know it's never a good time to borrow money, but interest rates are very attractive.
One question I have, which has no answer, but I'd especially want to pay close attention to, given the election situation, that can have huge impact
Sure.
on what the rates do and that sort of thing. So fasten our seatbelts.
It'll be an interesting ride this fall. That's why I don't want to say we're removed from it, but a lot of times the market has already got it figured out. But I don't know what they've got figured out right now. It's just a topsy-turvy world. But right now, the rates are steady.
Great. Thank you very much. So I think we're moving on. Thanks, Dick, very much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah. All right. Sophie, can we leave the rest of your update to the end and go back to the agenda? Great.
Great idea.
Okay. So I think we're on to a presentation about the public health update.
Do you want me to just start right in, Sophie?
Yeah, that would be great, Chief. Thanks.
Okay. Good evening, Council. Chief Lowe, Fire Chief here in Orono. I don't have any numbers or anything for you tonight. What I wanted to come forward with was just some information about what's going on with the University of Maine and the students that are returning. That seems to be a pretty big issue in town currently. So the fire department, in particular, Rob St. Louis, has been working with University of Maine. I've had some connection with RSU 26 And we've been speaking with some other groups about reintegration of students, getting the elementary, high school students back up and running, and some other things. So I'll talk briefly about the University of Maine and what's going on there. And I can't remember the start date right off the top of my head, but over the period of about 6 days, they're going to be reintroducing students to the campus. The intent is to move a few hundred people in a day over that 6-day time frame. While they're doing that, students have an opportunity to either present certification from their physician that they are COVID-free, or they will have to take a COVID test when they arrive at the university. That's for all students that are going to be living on campus, whether they are in-state or out-of-state students. Sometime after that, they will be allowed to move in their dorm rooms. Once that happens, they'll be isolated there until the results come back from their COVID test. We're thinking the turnaround time right now has been around 24 to 48 hours, but it could go out as far as 72 hours, and they'll receive instruction on what they're supposed to do during that time. We're actually working with the university to create a video for them for not only this initial isolation period, but if during the school year while they're there, they come down with COVID and go into isolation, they'll also have some additional information through a video that we create that talks about expectations of quarantine, how they get their food supplies, and those types of things. Non-resident or non-campus students that move back will also have to submit to COVID testing. That's for out-of-state students only. Maine students that come back will not be required to test, but out-of-state students will be required to test that one time, and then they will be allowed to go out to their apartment or the complexes wherever they live, or whatever the case may be. Now, there is a difference between students that live on campus and students that do not live on campus. For the students that live on campus, if during the school year, while they're there, they come down with COVID, they will be moved to a dormitory that's specifically listed as a COVID dorm, where they will be taken care of, receive treatment, monitored, those types of things through an alliance with Northern Light that the university has worked out. If they require transport to the hospital, it'll either be a university ambulance or us that go up and get them. Again, we have an arrangement worked out with the university ambulance, so we have plans in place as far as that goes. We will know the on-campus students, or the population of student number, rather, at least, of COVID patients that are there. What we won't know is the off-campus students that have contracted COVID and what their status is. Once they pass that initial testing phase, there's no requirement for them to report back to the campus to say whether they are or are not sick, or they do or they do not have COVID. The university has identified a process that they're going through now to be able to support those students who self-identify that they have something going on. But as far as public knowledge or sharing of information between the university or Orono Fire Department, we won't have that connection unless the students are willing to make that connection with us. As it is right now, the university is expecting that they will see some cases of COVID come through. That's just a numbers thing. The number of people that are coming back, they're figuring that they're going to see some. We don't really know how many. So it's would be inappropriate for me to speculate as to how many they think they're going to get. But we do feel pretty confident that we're going to be seeing a few cases that will come back and need to be quarantined once they get here until they have a clear test once they go through whatever phase they have to go through. Fraternity enrollment right now is very low. The university has been discussing with the fraternity groups about what expectations are. The fraternity oversight boards are in step with the university as far as trying to enforce social distancing, trying to make sure that parties that are inappropriate aren't happening, that proper hygiene and distancing and things like that are taking place within the fraternity houses. We have developed wellness packages for the students. Those have been distributed to the 3 major housing groups right now. As soon as the students start trickling back in, we'll be assisting the university again with getting those out to the off-campus students. That basically is a bag that contains masks. It has hand sanitizer. It has a little push device so you can push open doors or elevator buttons or whatever you need to do, and a few other things to help the students, one, be ready to start classes again, and two, just reminders that are out there for them so that if they're experiencing symptoms of COVID or somebody in their apartment or building or whatever has it, the things that they can do, people they can reach out to, contact, those types of things. We have been in touch with Maine Centers for Disease Control and talked about what it looks like with the students come back. Basically, their take on the situation right now is that we're doing the right things, the things that need to be done. We're doing what we can within the limits that we have available to us. They are watching what's going on here, and they've said, we realize that this is a huge population boom coming into your town, and we're here and ready to support you with whatever it is that you need for support going forward. In relation to RSU 26, we have, as I said, been in contact with them. We've been to a few meetings with them as they've gone through the planning process. They have a plan in place that's very similar to what other school districts are doing, not only in Maine, but across the country, where they're dividing the students into cohorts. So one group will go 2 days, there'll be a cleaning day, and another group will go the following 2 days, and then the weekend can be available for cleaning or what have you. So that's a plan that we definitely agree with, we're in support of. They have taken a lot of time and received a lot of stakeholder input in developing that program. So I think for what they have and for what we know about this virus and how kids contract it, I think this is it's a measured and well thought out process that they can adjust one way or the other if need be, depending on what the circumstances are in the community. Right now, Orono would be considered a low risk community, a low spread community. What we had for cases that we know of are confined to one facility. Any contacts that would have left that facility as far as staff members had already been identified. So there hasn't been a huge spread that we're aware of that's occurred from that facility. So that's really a bonus for us. And it allows us on the ambulance side to, I won't say let our guard down, but relax some of the precautions that we had been taking, if you will, which helps prevent some of that fatigue when you're always at a heightened state of alert. We have no doubt that we're probably going to have to go back into that heightened state. We're already starting to stock equipment and backfill things that we need to be able to provide care. But it's nice to just be able to take a breath for a second and really look at things globally as we prepare for what may be another round. Our concerns going forward certainly are the students going back to the university. But we also have some concerns about what the exposure to the elementary schools are going to look like with the students going back there, and the high schools as well. And that's not just here in Orono. That's a state concern, and it's a national concern. A lot of the information that we have surrounding kids is some of it's incidental, some of it comes from overseas, and we don't necessarily know what it's going to look like here. A lot of we talk about peer-reviewed literature and studies being the gold standard for a lot of what we do. The problem with this is that we are only 6 months into this pandemic, so there isn't a lot of evidence out there to base a lot of that research and treatment planning on. The other thing is that COVID-19, this particular COVID, is not completely similar to SARS and MERS, which are the two COVIDs that a lot of our best practices are based off of right now, especially in kids where you see the inflammatory disease and vasculature and the rashes and those types of things. So certainly what I guess I would leave with right now and open up with questions is although it feels like we're slowing down and we're working off best practice in relation to other COVID type illnesses, what I would say is stay true to those practices as far as social distancing and wearing face coverings when you can't social distance, and frequent washing of hands and cleaning of high touch surfaces, because it still is the best way to prevent and reduce transmission. And as time goes on and more of this stuff shakes out and more data more reliable data becomes available, we'll have a better picture on what we can do to help prevent or reduce the spread of this. Oh, one more thing. There are 2 human trials that are in progress right now. They have been rushed along. I know one of them has had really good results, so it's gone to a second, I think it will be a blind study group. And then the first one, I'm not sure where it is. But there are 2 that are promising right now that are in the pipeline. So, Sophie, I don't know if you have anything in particular you wanted me to hit other than that, or?
I just wanted to highlight that along with the public health team working with the university and the RSU, we have a team of folks working with the University of Maine to try to identify ways that we can better support our workforce as students are going back to school in this modified way all through the region. We think we're going to have folks in our workforce that are going to have some pretty major childcare issues. The university has come to the table. Mitch and Dave have both been part of those conversations. My understanding is that the school is also trying to solve this problem, so we're kind of working all together to see how we can marshal our finite resources to extend to maybe be able to help the community a little bit here.
I have a couple questions, if that's all right. Chief, thank you, by the way, for that information, for that update. In correspondence with the Avenue and the Grove, the other larger apartment complexes, what is their plan? I'm assuming they have a plan. They know this is coming. They know they're about to be full. And I would like to think that they took the wherewithal to bring some sort of medical support staff in. Do they have any plan?
So as it is right now, those groups do not have any plan. The university is working on planning right now for making sure that the students' needs in those complexes are met as far as food or hygiene, or I believe transportation is also being considered for them. But as far as the complexes themselves, there's no action plan that they have in place that we have spoken with them about. We have met with them, and we have expressed concern for the students. But they are considered tenants just like any other tenant, I guess, would be in Orono, is how we're perceiving their response to it at this time.
Sure, but there are hundreds of tenants, and I understand that's the answer that's there, and it's disappointing. I think it's not only the safety of the students, I think it's the impact that those students potentially could have on our entire community. So I'm really concerned and incredibly disappointed with that. Also, I'd like to know, will UMaine Ambulance Services be taking care of any potential cases happening on campus or at said apartment complex, Grove, or the Avenue, or will this be falling onto your shoulders?
So UMaine Ambulance will be handling a bulk of the cases, I would say, that need to be managed by an ambulance at the university. Where they will run into trouble is when patients need advanced life support, such as certain medications or airway procedures, then those will default to us because we have that specialty available to us where UMaine Ambulance doesn't. As far as the major complexes or other places that house university students, that will be Orono Fire's responsibility.
Okay, great, thank you. You mentioned we are considered a low-risk community, which is great news, thank you. Is that taking into consideration where we will be population-wise in 2 or 3 weeks? And do you anticipate us being a low-risk community at that point?
That hasn't come into play yet because the way you go up in your risk profile would be by the number of cases you have. So I think that'll be dependent on what we see for cases come in through the university. Okay. I will tell you that the goal of the university is to go until November 20th. But if they see a spike in cases coming through the door within the first couple of days, my expectation through conversation with them is they're going to really reconsider what their commitment is to holding in-person classes and maybe take a different tack.
Sure, thank you. That leads really well into my next question. If UMaine does close early, if it does go remote early, and they send students home. I'm assuming that's going to be on-campus students. What will happen with the students from the Avenue and the Grove? Will they also be sent home, or will they simply be just Orono residents, hopefully attending classes online and behaving appropriately?
So I think it's speculative, but my suspicion would be that because they have signed leases, more than likely they're going to want to remain in Orono and attend classes remotely.
I hope we can do something to enforce that they're adhering to some of the CDC recommendations. I think you've done a great job answering my my pitching practice here, throwing you curveballs. I appreciate that. But as far as the fraternities behaving accordingly and not partying, I'll be honest, I have more faith in my daughter's first grade class and wearing their masks every day than that happening. I certainly hope this is the case. And I just really appreciate all the work you're doing. Clearly, I'm pretty skeptical about how well this whole plan goes, but here we are doing the best we can with what we have. So thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sam. I'm as concerned about this upcoming situation. So, Mike, I had a question that you already answered anyway, Chief. But the COVID test for the in-state students, you said there's a 24 to 48 hour turnaround time. So where do they get that 24 to 48 hour turnaround time, and how close to move-in date should they be bringing that test with them? If they're negative now, in 2 weeks, there's no promise or guarantee that they won't be.
So the test has to be completed. The test has to have been read negative within 72 hours of them arriving at the university.
Okay.
And the 24 to 48 hour window is considered a really good time, but there's some belief that will be achievable because they're using they're using Jackson Laboratory. So the hope is be a quick turnaround time to get that done. And they'll be swabbing. It'll be throat swab conducted right there on campus in a large tent setup when they first get there.
So when they first get there, they'll be quarantined for 2 weeks, regardless of their test?
No, when they first get there, if they have a negative test, then they will be negative and allowed to conduct themselves however they normally would. If they do not have a negative test, they will be swabbed, and then they will be isolation until the test comes back, either negative or positive. If it comes back positive, then they will go into quarantine until they are free or they get a negative test.
Okay, and my first question was, where do they go to get these tests prior to moving on campus, and do they need a doctor referral to get this test?
So usually what they can do at this point, contact their primary care physician, and they will either conduct the test or they will send them to a testing site to have that test completed.
And they can just say, I'm a college student, I need to have this test. They don't have to say I'm having symptoms or any of those things.
No.
Okay. All righty. Thank you.
I want to ask a quick, thank you, Cheryl. Those were great questions. I just want a quick follow-up question. If a student does arrive at the university, does get their test, and does test positive, is there, you said, well, they'll be sent into quarantine. And also while they're waiting for their test, they'll be in isolation, and then if they're positive, into quarantine. What authority does the university have to enforce isolation and quarantine?
I don't know that I can answer that. I think what I would have to do is go back to the university and ask that question. I don't know that has come up specifically. So let me ask that question for you, and I'll get you an answer for that.
So I can tell you in general terms, Megan, the university has the ability through the agreements that students sign as they begin. It's kind of like the student conduct process. The university can make students do things that I can't make folks do off campus. Talking with Kenda Shealy in Student Life, they have constructed this in a way that these are the underlying fundamental requirements. If you're going to come to campus this year, you must do this, and if you don't, then you won't come, is the way it's been described to me.
So so that's good, except that if a student doesn't want to be in isolation or quarantine and doesn't really care if that means they get kicked out of the university for the year, then they could still be out and about in the community. My other question is related, I mean, assuming we'll need more information at a later time, but that accurately describes on-campus students, but for the off-campus students who I assume are required, the out-of-state off-campus students who I assume are required to get that test and able to attend classes, it seems like there's even less of an ability to corral.
Yeah, so I can only, the town can only enforce the governor's order, right? And we don't have an underlying ability to fine or arrest people, you know, for that. But the plan we have in place with the university is just like we are any other complaint. We go in, we educate, we try to get people to move to compliance. And in the case of university students, they are receiving so much information from the university about what is expected behavior that our next step is going to be, if we run across people who are not at all complying with the expectations, to immediately refer them to conduct. And conduct is telling us that they will take that and run with it just like they would if it were on campus.
Okay, thank you. I hope that it just seems, yeah, I mean, thank you, Sophie, and thank you, Chief. It seems like we're being thrown a whole big scary situation without maybe some of the safeguards in place that could have been happening at the state level to help us navigate this.
We are still trying to work with the state. As I just indicated in a comment to panelists, that we've opened discussion with the governor's office through Maine Municipal Association, not just about Orono, but there are a few towns in the state that have university or college students that come and really swell their numbers and create kind of an area of concern. We have not heard back yet. I would anticipate we'd hear more in the coming couple of days. Next Tuesday, Cindy, Chief Lowe, Josh, and Dave Mylan and I are going to be on a Zoom meeting with other community leaders, so VZ, Penobscot Nation, and Old Town, with the University of Maine, the president, and Robert Dana and others, to talk a little bit more about this. I will tell you, I think everybody is working really hard to work together on this. The university has been quite responsive to the concerns as we bring them up, but they have a whole host of competing interests happening. And then at the end of the day, everything has to go through the systems office as well. So I've been pleased that they've invited us to the table and they're listening to the concerns that we bring up. Their original thoughts on testing were a little bit different than where they are today, primarily because of Chief Lowe and Rob's intervention with it. I wish that the off-campus housing complexes, where they are so densely populated, I wish that they could see their role a little bit differently. We have tried, we have come at it a couple of different ways, and now we're trying to work through somebody who might have a little bit more power than we do.
I would like to at least, I know you guys are trying, seriously, thank you. And this is just such an ugly situation. We're staring square in the face. I am really concerned about those apartment complexes. And I don't know if they're at full capacity or not. I don't know if they ever watch town council meetings. Hello, if they are. But if they're not at full capacity, it'd be lovely if they could have, a couple rooms set aside or for quarantine, or at least get a medical professional on there, because there's a good chance it's coming, and they're just keep cashing those rent checks. That's fine.
And a few of those complexes too are right in back of Treats Falls. Like they're right there. And it's like, for me, this is scary. And I personally feel that this is the wrong time to be opening schools right now in this country. So I know there's nothing I can do to stop it, but it feels like we're doing the wrong thing.
I just chime in that I share the concern. I think if you following articles in publications like the New York Times, they're talking about university communities being potentially the next epicenter for the spread of COVID-19. And I really appreciate the work that our town employees have been doing, but I'm very disappointed that we haven't gotten that same kind of buy-in from the large complexes. That's very sad. And I don't know if there's anything that we can do to put some pressure on them to rethink that. I don't know whether letters from the council would be of help, but if there's anything we can do to pressure those complexes to really do something about this and have a plan, I think we should do it.
So the chief and I will chat about this and maybe try to take another run at the complexes using you as our primary reason. Sometimes that gets me further than us at the door.
I
So
appreciate
I know we've talked about this before and there's no way to enforce this, but our downtown merchants really also, struggle with people wearing masks and things like that. How do we keep that, so that they feel safe, so that our downtown feels safe as well?
I'm going to get to that, but Lori looks like she's trying to say something, so let Lori speak and then I'll get to that.
Thank you, Cheryl. That's exactly what I was going to say, is that over the course of these many months, I've seen compliance with wearing masks get better and better across our town. And for example, I was at Hannaford today. There was not one person anywhere in the store that wasn't wearing a mask properly. And that's been a big challenge over time to see people, even though they had someone monitoring entry, that we had a population that wasn't necessarily following mask wearing. But I've been getting communications from people in town saying, how can we be sure that people will be wearing masks in the stores? And we know that that our police force can't go out and enforcing mask wearing, but we do want to have a culture of safety. And we know that one way to be safe is for everyone to be wearing masks. So when you're talking about the large complexes, I know that I've gone into places where they have someone at the door, and those large complexes have a general entry in many of them, at least where people go in to get their mail. So perhaps that's when you do say the town council's concerns, we're just bringing that to you. One would be to see if they could have someone on site that would be encouraging mask wearing. And also, I guess there's something we can do as a town to encourage mask wearing.
Well, that's a great lead in. I agree with all of you, and I have a real concern about the complexes as well. Because we cannot do an ordinance right now, we were trying to propose a resolution. And I know resolutions, proclamations don't often do a lot, but if the council is interested in creating a resolution that we could then put on bus stops and maybe on the town board and definitely on the website. A little bit more background on it.
Yeah, so we've seen some towns adopt orders where they are mandating that people wear masks, that people keep social distance. There's two ways that they can do that. One is through emergency powers, which the town of Orono does not have emergency powers. And the second is through the adoption of an ordinance. I can't see Roger Huber. I reached out to him because we have a couple people who want us to look at being more directive. And he searched, he cannot find in his legal search places that went through an ordinance process to adopt an ordinance that mandates mask wearing. We can absolutely, it's part of general health, safety, and welfare. We can mandate that people do that. The question then becomes, how do we enforce it? And at a time when we want a kinder and gentler police department, I'm not sure that we want to send people out to enforce mask wearing beyond the education piece that we're trying to do now. And social distance. It's not just about the mask, it's about the social distance, and it's about the hygiene practices too. So I think if we want to go the ordinance route, it takes time to craft an ordinance, and it takes time to go through the public process that makes them legal. So the resolution is at least a stopgap to get you there. I had hoped that the state of Maine was going to take a more proactive position, which would allow us to be doing the same education and technical enforcement that coastal communities, Bangor, Brewer, and others are doing right now. They are not. So at this point. So I don't know if folks wanted to try to enact local rules around social distance and mask wearing, we can give it a college try. It's just going to take, I think, some thought, and part of that thought is going to be how are we going to want to enforce it?
It's really unfortunate that the state hasn't taken a more proactive approach, especially with, it seems like the state recognized the need for this in certain large communities, and it seems like college-centric communities should be included in that. I know that, you know, the example of Hannaford's is great, but that's because Hannaford's as a company has decided to require mask wearing. Whereas we stopped into another local grocery store yesterday afternoon and ran right out because nobody was wearing a mask. So it's a business by business, you know, basis now. And even in Bangor, you know, anecdotally, a friend went into a sporting goods store and people weren't wearing masks, and he asked an employee, like, what do you do? And they said, corporate won't let us enforce it. So, you know, it's time for the state to step in meaningful ways on this and help towns out. I will say, has anybody been to Bar Harbor recently? So they're using what I would call funny public shaming to help mandate mask wearing in town. And it works very well. I'm not sure, I don't know whether they have any kind of ordinance or whether they did a resolution or anything, but what they do have is all along all of the streets periodically, there are sandwich boards, there are signs, and then the businesses have gotten into the act too and put out chalkboards. And it's all just like basically shaming people if they're not wearing a mask, like in a funny, gentle way, but also in a very firm, serious way. Like, don't walk around the streets unless you have your mask on. Don't come into these businesses unless you have your mask on. And it really works. The number of people that I saw not wearing a mask, very, very small, because even the people you could tell maybe didn't want to, they felt kind of like pressure, public pressure to put it on.
I was going to, oh, Sophie, I'm sorry. I mean, the whole going across the bridge directional thing that we had before, you know, where people wanted to control that whole thing. And you, Rob, and you were so fast. There were signs up like very quickly after that. And I don't know if it's making any difference. I've seen some people go over the bridge making room for each other. Is that possible? I was going to suggest that, you know, could we do signs? They don't have to be funny, because good Lord knows you don't want me
I have no sense of humor, Sam.
That's right. I didn't say anything.
So the answer to your question is we absolutely can. I don't know what it looks like. I would suggest, and I guess I'm looking to Cindy for some guidance. Might it make sense for us to look at resolution for next week as a stopgap while we try? I will issue a letter in your name to the governor. How's that? To see if we can pressure there, and come back and let me spend just a little bit of time with Roger to figure out what we can and can't kind of do. My fear is when this all started, when the police would go places and take any kind of tone of enforcement, it amplified. There was a lot of pushback, and taking a more of a tone of education, we've gotten more compliance, and we haven't escalated situations quite the same way. I know we are struggling at the staff level here to implement and manage our pandemic preparedness and response policy, which is part of what's in the resolution. I think I shared a draft with Cindy that we would want to add in there as a council voice.
Sophie, I think one of the good things about a pretty visible signage campaign is that it empowers the average resident to feel like it's okay for them to say, hey, you know, I'd be more comfortable if you were wearing a mask. Why aren't you? Because that allows people to be actively involved instead of afraid to say something.
So we have.
I was going to actually add that I think if the community pulls together like they did with Pride and says, you know, we're a mask wearing community, then it falls less on the police, and it just shows the community is watching. And you know, I've had people tell me, you know, you're too close, or you're too, or this or that. So, and there are big signs on the university at this point, at all the entrances, that you must wear masks. So they're starting.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of money from the original Keep Maine Healthy grant. We were supposed to hear on Friday if we got more money. In the second round, we did include a new signboard for out front that was digital. It would require council to make a change in the ordinance so that we could use it. But that would allow us better communication, more words, not having to figure out how to creatively abbreviate. And I think we could look at maybe some more placard type things. So I think the goal that what I'm kind of envisioning here is a multi-pronged approach. Does council want to try this without an ordinance, or are you interested in an ordinance? Because that's going to take some time, and I would need to run that concurrent with other things that we would be trying to do.
I think that the issue with the ordinance is it wouldn't take effect at the earliest until October. And so I think we need to do something now. I mean, even if we got to schedule a public hearing for September for it, right?
So we scheduled the public hearing in September. You can adopt it the night of the public hearing, and then it takes 30 days for an ordinance to go into effect. So October would be it. If you're interested in doing that, I can still work on all the other pieces. My preference really would be if the state would give us a little bit of teeth that we could work with. But let me work on a draft. And I think if we could add an order to this meeting that would allow us to call a public hearing for the September meeting.
Sophie, I just want to thank you for the work you're doing, and this is a ton of extra stuff, but it's incredibly important. So thank you for taking it so seriously and listening to our concerns. And I'm sure you share them as well. Could you also, since we're talking about how much work you do, could we also draft a letter to the management of the apartment complexes saying the town council's position, and also that we're moving to act on both resolution and moving forward with an ordinance? So it really would behoove them to get their act together before there were, consequences.
Yep. And I think one of the things I want to talk with Roger about is where the line is for what we can demand dense housing populations to owners of that to have to bring to the table. I don't know what we can do, but that would be
strongly recommend. And if they interpret that as a demand.
No. Oh, I'm walking on a different path. I think it's always nice to ask people. I'm thinking about the ordinance. I think that we hold landlords accountable for other things through ordinance. That financial hit is often a reason to gain that we get compliance sometimes. So let me think about how to word an ordinance, I guess, is where I'm coming from.
Good.
Okay, so I think where we're at, and Terry, did you want to say something before?
I've been very patient. I actually had a couple other questions for Chief, and great dialogue, loving it. But first of all, Chief, I want to say that I'm happy that we do have Jackson Laboratories to be able to be a partner with the University of Maine system to try to push these tests out to make it so it's not a typical 4, 5, 6 day thing and a lot of this. I have two questions for you. The first one being, and this is probably from the beginning of when the university was first looking at how this was going to look. They had kind of said that they would have everybody tested as they came in. And then when you had the Thanksgiving break, they were looking at kids going back home, but not coming back until the new year. Not sure if that still stands. But if it does stand, does that mean when they come back, do they retest again before they come back into the system?
So right now it's standing that they are looking at releasing them on November 20th with a proposed window of sometime in February to come back. And I would think that they would be tested again when they return. I don't believe that's been spelled out clearly, but that would make sense to me that would be the logical thing to do.
Okay. And second question was that I believe it was CNN that had done a report that we've surpassed 5 million cases. Also, globally, we're recognized as probably the country that's going to have the biggest issues with attaining PPE. I'm just automatically go into the world you're in. What is it going to mean to our citizens or our frontline people to be able to access the PPE? Are we stocking? I don't know what they're saying it's going to be an issue. So what does it look like?
Yeah, we're grabbing what we can right now. I've instructed my supply person to get as many gowns and masks and whatever else we might need. Certainly N95s will be a concern for us when we deal with patients that are confirmed. We have some tools available to us that maybe other ambulance services or companies don't, in that we have the SCBA that we wear for structural firefighting. That mask we can actually attach other filtering mediums to, or other filtering components to, that have that N95 medium, I should say. The other thing we could do in a worst case scenario is we could put those air tanks on and we could wear those while we treat patients. It wouldn't be ideal, but worst case scenario, that's something that we would default back to. So I don't think there will be a time when we won't have adequate respiratory protection. I think it'll be a matter of it won't be ideal respiratory protection.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I think that we are at a point where that we're not going to be on a three-prong approach. I think we're going to look at a resolution for, we're going to look at a letter to the big complexes, and we're going to look into ordinance language. And,
And you and I are going to make a letter for the governor that you're going to sign.
and we're going to make a letter for the governor that I'm going to sign. So with that presentation, thank you very much, Chief. We'll move into agenda review, and I would ask someone to make a motion to add order 20-135, which would put a hearing for an ordinance on mask wearing.
I would make that motion to add order 20-135, was it?
Yes,
Second.
great. All right. So I'm going to have to ask Nancy, can you do the roll call vote?
Yes, I can.
Thanks.
Councilor Kuntz,
In favor.
Councilor Osher,
In favor.
Councilor Perry,
In favor.
Councilor Maynard,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Councilor Robertson,
In favor.
Councilor Grenier.
In favor.
And the vote was 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Thank you very much. Oh,
Can I just interrupt for a minute?
sure.
My assumption when I bring this ordinance back, you want me to draft an ordinance that is on the most restrictive side that we can be, and you guys can pull it back if you think it's overboard. You want to see the most the town could do.
Yeah, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, and Sophie, in a situation, I mean, if we get this language started and drafted, I mean, we may not need it if people are in compliance and are, doing what they need to do, and we keep this, down to a level of safety, I guess, right? But if we have it, if we have it done and we need it, then I think that's, timely.
Yeah,
It'll
and
be timed.
I think even if we don't need it right now, I think it's something that we can use. Sometimes we get drafts that we set aside, but that we can come back to. So yeah, I think that that's a good plan. Looks like we lost Megan.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, we'll move on in the meeting to approval of minutes of July 13th, 2020.
Cindy, before we move on, do
Yeah.
we have to add an order for a public hearing on a proposed ordinance?
That's what order 135 will be when
Sure.
we, yep. Sophie, I imagine, is scribbling it as we speak. So order 20-135 will be added to the end of the meeting. So we'll move on to approval of minutes of July 13th, 2020. I'll take a motion, please.
Approval.
In the second.
Second?
Does anyone have any corrections, changes, comments?
Yeah, I have one. At the very end on the adjournment motion, Councilor Tom Perry had moved, and apparently Councilor Tom Grenier seconded it. So that's okay.
Oh, you don't want to be Tom today.
Great name.
I'm sure Nancy can make that change. Any other comments? Hearing none. Nancy, would you take the roll call vote, please?
Yes. Yes, and I would be glad to make that change. Councilor Kuntz,
In favor.
Councilor Osher,
In favor.
Councilor Perry,
In favor.
Councilor Maynard,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner. Oh, okay.
She's not on it right this moment.
Okay. We can come back to that. Councilor Robertson
In favor.
and Councilor Grenier.
In favor.
Councilor Gardner's back.
What am I voting
And
on?
Councilor Gardner.
Approval of the minutes.
Favor.
In favor? And the vote is 7 in favor and then none opposed.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, we don't have any public hearings tonight, so we'll go to acknowledgements by council members, and I'll go by my screen. So Cheryl's up first.
I would just like to acknowledge all of those people who are wearing masks and are out and about and are still participating in our community economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Terry?
I just want to do another plug for our wastewater people to, and if you talk to people, please remind them about baby wipes are not flushable, because eventually, like we said, and I've said many times, it's going to cost us a lot of money to repair the damage caused by this stuff. So please, please, please remind people to not use baby wipes.
Lori?
I just want to thank the Public Works for painting a beautiful rainbow crosswalk. It's lovely. They did that this Wednesday. I think it was Wednesday. And it was lovely. And I second what Cheryl said. It's wonderful to see people out and about. And I've seen people even just walking and bicycling wearing masks, and that protects everyone to be wearing a mask. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Sam?
Yes, just echo the excellent work by Public Works. They did a great job. I was out and about, a rare occurrence for me before 7 o'clock, and I saw Rob carefully out there with his team eyeing the crosswalk, getting ready to go. And that was just fantastic. Looks great. And kudos to the community for making this happen. It's a huge community win. But also, speaking of the power community, I want to acknowledge Bob Sinclair. Several weeks ago, he's a neighbor of mine. We live in the same neighborhood. Several weeks ago, he was at the local convenience store down at Ledbetter's and learned of a young woman there who was struggling to get her education and to pay medical bills because her husband's dealing with some very serious medical issues. And Bob came up with the idea for our community, the Sailor neighborhood, to do a community yard sale, and everybody rallied. But Bob was just the powerhouse behind it. If you know Bob, when he gets behind something, he goes. It was fantastic. We had the community yard sale was 2 Saturdays ago. Ledbetter's donated 20 cents per gallon of gas that was sold. Jersey Subs up on Stillwater donated 20% of their sales to this. And all in all, at the end of the day, they raised well over $10,000 to help this family. Incredibly moving. And so hats off to the community that really, really stepped up and did great work here, and especially to Bob Sinclair, and definitely best wishes to that family too. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Tom?
I'd like to acknowledge the recent passing of 2 longtime Orono residents. Martin Lapin, who was a longtime attorney in both Texas and Maine, passed away recently and was a great community member. And also Ross Coda, who was a lifelong Orono resident, recently passed away.
Thanks, Tom. Megan?
I'd first like to acknowledge the Orono Beautification Committee. They always do great work, but their work has been really popping the last couple of weeks as we get into August. I think that, when nice flowers and plantings are done really well, it's easy for them to kind of blend into the background because it just looks like, oh, this naturally grew out of the ground, but it's so much hard work. And I think it makes such a big difference in terms of the look and the feel of our town. And so I'm really appreciative for that. I also want to echo some of the comments about the crosswalk, and particularly to shout out Rob Yerxa. There were some bumps in the road, figuratively, along the way to getting to this crosswalk, and we still have some bumps to iron out. But, as we've seen many times, Rob is incredibly an incredible creative problem solver, and he's, just puts his head down and works on things until they get done. And he was out there with a roller brush painting the ground on Wednesday. So it's always nice to have an opportunity to recognize what incredible staff and volunteers we have in Orono.
Thank you. I would like to recognize our town manager because with everything that's going on, for you to figure out that we need to refinance bonds and contact the MMA to get the governor about the university impact on our town. That's a lot of forethought, and you should be recognized for that. And we appreciate all of your forethought. So thank you. Moving on to unfinished business. We don't have any. So I'm asking for a motion for the consent agenda.
Move approval.
All right,
Second.
great. Nancy, will you take a vote on the consent agenda, please?
Yes. Councilor Coons?
In favor?
Councilor Osher?
Favor?
Councilor Perry?
In favor.
Councilor Maynard?
In favor?
Councilor Gardner?
In favor?
Councilor Robertson?
In favor.
Councilor Grenier?
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Thank you very much, Council Clerk. Moving on to new business. Order 20-132, order awarding the bid for the town office painting project to CertaPro Painters of South Portland for $11,605 to be drawn from the approved FY21 capital budget. Take a motion, please.
Move approval.
Second.
All right. Sophie?
We talked about this during the budget process for 2 years in a row because we ended up pushing this project forward last year. Staff went out for quotes. CertaPro Painters of South Portland were low quote by a significant amount. And we are suggesting that it is now time to paint the peeling wooden elements of our building and rehab some of the window sills that need to be rehabbed.
This is all exterior work?
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? We lost Megan again.
Oh, I like the 2-year warranty attached to that, that proposal.
Sophie, so given the state of production and everything was down ramped, and what are we actually, I mean, I'll use this as an example. The Penobscot Valley Country Club had they had that damage. They're still waiting on the carpet 4 or 5 months later because everything's backlogged. So doing this, how long do you think it's going to even be like before we even see it?
The paint project, we are in line for this to start at the beginning of October. Having said that, contractors are contractors and best laid plans and all that.
Megan, we're talking about the painting. We haven't got to the vote yet. All right, any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. Nancy, will you take the vote, please?
Yes. Councilor Coons?
In favor?
Councilor Osher?
Favor?
Councilor Perry?
In favor.
Councilor Maynard?
In favor?
Councilor Gardner?
In favor?
Councilor Robertson?
In favor?
Councilor Grenier?
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. Moving on to order 20-133, order awarding the bid for the town office carpeting second floor project to Carpet One of Bangor for $14,000 to be drawn from the approved FY21 capital budget. I'll take a motion, please.
Move approval.
Second.
All right. Sophie?
So So I know it's been a long time since counselors have been in council chambers, but you may recall that the carpet has stretched to a point that it's a hazard. That carpet's actually glued right down to the floor. Our plan is to rip up all of the carpet and put down carpet squares so that we'll now be able to pull squares up one at a time and replace as we need to. The total cost of that is $14,000. This is a two-phase project, $14,000 for the first phase, which we planned this year. And then I think it's the year after next in the plan, we would be looking at replacing the carpet downstairs and the tile downstairs. And this was a situation where staff tried very hard to find installers who would give us quotes. And I've got backup that shows 4 or 5 different times they went out, and we only have Carpet One that has supplied the quote for us.
Any questions or comments other than what color is it going to be?
Given all of the other wonderful decorative choices that were made when this carpet color went in, I think the plan is to keep it as similar to this as we can.
Good.
And
I'm
it
thinking
hides the dirt.
aubergine.
What was that?
I'm saying aubergine. That's all.
Right. All right. I knew I would start a flurry, but Nancy, will you take a vote on this, please?
Councilor Coons?
Absolutely.
Councilor Osher?
Agreed.
Councilor Perry?
In favor.
Councilor Maynard?
In favor?
Councilor Gardner?
Favor.
Councilor Robertson?
In favor.
And Councilor Grenier?
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Great. Thank you. Order 20-134, order adopting the FY21 council work plan. Take a motion, please.
Move approval.
Second.
He beat you to it, Tom.
It's good.
All right. I think we've probably talked this through several times, so unless anyone has any additional comments.
The only thing I had was that apparently on the community development, it's not a major thing. The formalizing an annual plan to represent Pride Month, the very first line, the last line, so we can get rid of one of them.
I thought it was doubly important.
Well, look at that. We already took something off the list. We are really effective. That was great.
I'll take care of that. Thank you.
So my apologies, my neighbor is mowing his lawn, which mostly you didn't have to hear, but now that I'm speaking, you can hear it. Thank you so much for this work plan. I mentioned the same thing again, which was last time I mentioned that I'm for the idea that we would look into racial equity. And right now, the only way it's written is this review of the police. And I wanted something a little more overarching. And the last time we spoke, Megan said, well, if you really care, think about that. You haven't given us anything to review, like a proposal. And that would be great. I'd love to make a proposal. And I was impressed by the work that Cheryl did to make a proposal for the committee that she was proposing. And I'm guessing that she did that with the town manager. No, you just did it on your own? Yeah? Okay, great. So I can make one of those. And I realize it's not part of this work plan, but it seems that anything that's worth doing, it takes a long time to get to the place where we have the information from each other about what it is, what we're proposing. So I will do that and bring it to the next time we discuss things.
And Lori, for clarification, I made the proposal and Sophie and I discussed it and fine-tuned it, but it was not, it was, that's how we worked it, so.
Right, so
For additional clarification, I brought this up last time we had this conversation, but this is one, so when we had our last finalize the work plan meeting, Lori brought up that you wanted something about this. You couldn't find the language. Cindy volunteered to draft the language for you, and it appears, as I brought up in our last meeting on this subject, it appears as item H under number 3, develop a plan through a series of community discussions. So the idea in that language is we do some education and some community outreach, and then we make a plan. So that keep working on a proposal. That's great, but I don't want to leave the public with the incorrect assumption or information that it isn't in our work plan, because it is in our work plan. Cindy did draft that in there.
Great, thank you.
Lori, I just want to say, Lori, thank you for bringing that up. I think this is really important. I think we all agree with that. And Meg, also, thank you for getting it in there under item 3, letter H. But Lori, thank you very much for bringing this up and for being persistent with this.
Yep, and I'll give you an update in a little bit about where we stand. So if there's no other questions or comments, if there's none, okay. Nancy, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Councilor Coons,
In favor?
Councilor Osher,
In favor?
Councilor Perry,
In favor?
Councilor Maynard,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
In favor?
Councilor Robertson,
In favor.
Councilor Green.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there are none opposed.
All right. So order 20-135. Do you want me to? Did you send it to me, or is that a?
No, I'm just gonna say order 20-135 is order setting the date for September 14, 2020. Let's take out the time. As the date for a public hearing on a proposed new ordinance regulating prevention and planning practices related to limiting the spread of COVID-19 as well as the related community response.
That sounds good. I'll take a motion on that.
Move approval.
All right. And a second, please.
Second.
All right. He's still getting you. That Tom Grenier just keeps popping in there.
It's a new personality.
Right.
Go for it.
Is there any questions or comments on this? So hopefully we'll have something by September that we can discuss. So we'll be working on that in the next couple of weeks. Nancy, will you take a vote, please?
Councilor Coons,
In favor?
Councilor Osher,
In favor?
Councilor Perry,
In favor?
Councilor Maynard,
In favor?
Councilor Gardner,
Favor?
Councilor Robertson,
In favor.
and Councilor Grenier.
In favor.
And the vote is 7 in favor, and there were none opposed.
Thank you, Nancy. And I like the way you call the counselors, because it harkens me back to the time when we sat on the dais, and that was the order that we sat in. So I just close my eyes and see you all sitting there.
I was feeling rather nostalgic as well. So thank you. This is great. And I'm also, between this and envisioning the carpet.
Right. Someday we'll get there. So we're moving to council committee and representative reports. And let me just quickly give an update on what I've been doing, because, you know, it's me. As far as the diversity and racial awareness, we have met with people from Peace and Equity. Is that the right name? And we talked to them about an approach, and it's really could be a couple of different prong approach. And I'll let Sophie or Megan step in if I don't get it right. But what we're going to do is kind of separate the police from our discussion initially, because one of the things that was brought to us in our initial discussions with this company consultants was that the people that are dealing with the police, it can be a very emotional position for both sides. And they strongly recommended some sort of confidentiality in working through this. So they're going to work on a series of trainings and listening groups. And it may end up being a different facilitator. I'm not sure. Go ahead.
I can speak to that, I think the conversations that we've had with a variety of people have led us to the conclusion that this is really a three-pronged approach. The police have their own work to do, and I think they're going to be working with those same consultants to help facilitate that effort. The town staff has its own amount of professional development that we have to do. And I think we're probably going to be working with a different consultant that I think will be able to meet the needs of a very eclectic senior staff in terms of where they're all coming from. And then there's the council approach. And I think our thought was to separate that and have the council kind of work with the same consultant that the police department will be using, but that there is an element of education that needs to happen at the very beginning of that. And we are working right now with the town attorney to try to find a way to do that in an executive session so that it can be a little bit more candid and personal for council. So we think that that will be able to happen. I've reached out to counselors, other people that I know are very active in this movement. And what I am hearing is that the issues with the police department should really try to be worked through the police department, with the solution for the town council being education among town council, and then likely meeting with representatives, community leaders on a smaller scale to talk about overarching policy, to keep council at the policy level. But I was quite impressed with the consultants. Megan and Cindy met with me, and they were very engaged. They know the community. They both have a lot of experience, both with the University of Maine and Orono. And they have a very unique perspective. So I think the next step was to try to get them to provide a general scope of work and budget for this work.
Yeah.
And I think you're having a hard time pinning that down at this point.
That's where I am, is trying to get a hold of them to get some information as to the cost and the exact approach that they would suggest. So that's something I'm working on with Sophie and Megan. So we'll let you know when I get something back on that. The other thing is I've also reached out to the Penobscot Nation, and Darren Renko and James Francis will be speaking to us for about an hour next Monday at 4. And it's going to be more of a historic perspective and what Chief Orono meant to this area. It's not really a political perspective. James Francis is the cultural historian for the nation. He's not the political structure. So But it's a first step for us to get to understand. There's a lot of information about Chief Orono and some things that landmarks that are in this town that I didn't realize were even here. So,
Excuse me. So you're working with racial equity and justice, David, Patrick, and Desiree Nicole Vargas?
that's who we're hoping to work with. Yep.
Great.
So that's what I've been up to. Megan, do you want to talk about comp plan? I was wondering when the next comp plan meeting is actually.
Yes, so very quickly, just an update on the Pride crosswalk vis-a-vis the LGBTQ recognition committee Terry and I are putting together. Just quickly, so we'd hoped to use the kind of paint that is used in the crosswalks around town, that kind of, it's some sort of plasticky thing that burns into the pavement, and it lasts for like 2 years, and it's durable and it looks nice for a long, long time. So we were really hoping that we could get that more permanent kind of technique, and that we could get all the 10 colors of the Pride Progress flag, because that was also important to the community to have it be the progress colors. Unfortunately, they came back with, well, we can only give you 6 colors and it will cost you about $10,000 to do a crosswalk. So that is why Rob was purchasing the same concrete application paint that they use for their crosswalk in Bangor, that's just Benjamin Moore, and was painting that. So that's only a few $100s, but it degrades very quickly. So Rob's fortunately going to keep kind of looking into what can be done for more cost-effective, staff time effective applications. So that's just the update from the Pride Recognition Committee. And then briefly, so we had a very entertaining meeting on Monday last week for comp plan implementation. We got through one agenda item. So I'll tell you about that briefly for the folks at home. We were talking about a number of different things we're looking at in the village residential, the village commercial, and the MDR, in terms of just a lot of different things. You can watch the meeting back if you want to go through it, but where we're at basically at this point in the conversation is we're ready to get some input from the public. So our town planner is going to start working on that. And so that'll be our next step, to see what folks are thinking and how they're feeling about implementing some of these comp plan recommendations in those areas of town. So we got through that one item, and then we got Zoom bombed, and now the FBI is on the case. So Sophie, would you like to tell us when we're finishing that meeting?
So unless you want to schedule more meeting, we would next meet on September 3rd. We flipped that to a Thursday because the holiday is the next week, and I didn't want to go a month without a meeting. So that would be the plan.
Sounds good to me.
Terry, do you?
Yeah. Yeah, my meeting didn't get bombed at all. But first, before I say my thing about the crosswalk, I want to just make a statement about that. Is that it is? I just want to still remind people, saying that Orono was the town that actually really kind of put our face in the main scene as an amazing LGBTQ effort, starting with Meg's kind of grouping of people doing the windows and stuff like that. And so this is the culmination of something that makes, I'm probably more partial to say that Orono is a great place that's accepting of everybody. So having said that, in the Community Development Committee, we talked about solar stuff. So we discussed the importance of land use to represent solar projects and creating standards relevant to the solar projects. And we started the beginnings of defining the use, like performance standards, screening, buffering, and vegetation management, lot coverage calculations, decommissioning systems, and glare from panels. It was a good discussion, and we're moving forward with the standards, and there's more to come on that from at the next meeting. We also talked about an ordinance revision to allow expansion of an existing self-storage unit. It's east of I-95. Discuss avenues that would allow this expansion of the existing use, zoning change, and there will more than likely be a public notice. And lastly, Dave Mylan spoke with us, gave us an economic update, and some businesses, as you can imagine, are taking it on the chin, while others are doing great. But as always, as we all should do, is to continue to ask people to support local as much as you possibly can to kind of help us weather this economic crisis for a chunk of our businesses. So that's, in review, that's what we talked about.
Great, thanks, Jerry. Tom?
We had a very full Finance and Operations Committee meeting last Thursday with 5 council members attending. Major items on the agenda were a review of revenue sharing information. The state's Revenue Forecasting Committee has made their projection on what state revenue is going to be, and then that has been translated into what revenue sharing would be for communities. And although it is a projection, they were projecting an increase in revenue sharing from what we had budgeted. So we discussed the options of what to do about that. And I think we unanimously decided that the prudent thing to do was to not change anything. This was a projection subject to modification and change. And the more we heard about the state revenue shortfall that is projected, the more we were concerned that this new figure of revenue sharing might not hold. So we decided to just hold off, not change anything, look at it in the next couple of months and see if we wanted to make any adjustments in our budget. But chances are we're just going to stay with it for the remainder of the fiscal year. We also discussed with Sophie and Chief Lowe the fire department staffing situation. 2 long-term absences have created some significant draws on our overtime line, and we looked at the option of early hire for one of the firefighters that we were planning to hire in the spring, and whether that was going to be a cost-effective alternative to using a lot of overtime to cover the absences. And we agreed that the early hire would be a positive step. And finally, we talked with our assessor about the need to have some additional help to complete our community-wide assessment by April 1st. And we agreed to have a modification in the contract with the folks that we are working with who are helping our assessor in order to get that work done. So it was a long and full meeting with a number of decisions made.
Great,
And I think that's it.
all right. Sam, do you have any committees or anything to report on?
No, but my garden is doing great.
Great, that's the important thing.
I'm coming over.
Tom, you want some zucchini? Come on over and bring the truck.
No. I want cucumbers. The chipmunks are destroying my cucumbers.
Lori, do you have any committee reports or representative reports?
No?
Cheryl?
Yes, I do. And I have lots of cucumbers, Tom, so
Nice.
I will walk some over to you. So we've been gathering committee members, not gathering, but gathering committee members. So I think we have a good representation of people who are interested in environmental issues. So I'm just going to give you kind of a brief. They sent me some little bios, which I shouldn't say little. I've got 2 PhD candidates. We've got another climate, Dan Dixon, the campus sustainability director, and he's an assistant professor with the university's Climate Change Institute. Dan is one of our first committee members. He's also on the Maine Climate Council for the state of Maine. Breanne Berry is a PhD candidate in anthropology and environmental policy. She has worked in sustainability. Her sustainability work ranges from energy efficiency to environmental education and zero waste programs. She's a legislative graduate fellow for Scholar Strategy Network, and she holds a BA in cultural anthropology from George Washington University, an MS in urban affairs from CUNY Hunter College, and she is working with at the University of Maine. One of our committee members is Lydia Horn, also a PhD candidate. She has a bachelor's in conservation biology and a minor in anthropology and French, so in case we have to do our meetings in French. She is a
So Cheryl made fun of the French and now she's.
hey, my mother's name is Patron, so I know about French. I can make fun of them. She is a social
Cheryl, you keep freezing.
Am
Well,
I still frozen?
there you are.
Okay. Another member is, so there's three. We've got Ben Hale, and I don't have a whole don't know a whole lot about Ben, but he's been a longtime member of the Orono Land Trust, and he's currently the vice president of the Orono Land Trust, and he would like to be part of this. And then we have Cindy, who we don't need any introduction to. I know, and me and myself. So we're ready to, we're looking forward to getting together. Our first meeting is August 27th. And we've got some preliminary data has gone out to them, some research that I've done and put together kind of a packet. And yeah, and so we're ready to sit down and everybody's happy and raring to go. So that's it for us.
Great.
Thank you. Well, with that, we'll go to the town manager to see if you can top all of our representatives.
Not possible. Not even a little bit. I want to start by just letting you guys know that I received a request today from OTO Fiber Corporation. They are having a little bit of a catch-22. They've got as you know, they finished up their project for stringing the fiber. They have a last payable that needs to be paid before they can get their grant funds reimbursed. And they are $12,500 in need. So they are asking if the town of Orono would loan them $12,500 for 1 month to allow them to pay the vendor and then get reimbursement and repay us. I will just tell you, we are on the hook for more than $12,500 from them. Remember, they are us. They are all the same entity, kind of, sort of. But I don't want to issue a loan without some approval from council. My thought is, I see one.
I guess for a month, we could probably do it.
So if it works for you, what I would do is on the next council meeting, put a consent item to make sure that the auditor doesn't have a problem with me giving away money.
Good.
Okay. All right. We are good. Just reminding folks that we have an appeals board training on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. If people are interested, you can tune in. We'll be streaming live on Facebook, is my understanding, and in the Zoom universe. And then there are 2 hearings back to back on August 20th, which is a Thursday, I believe. We've already talked about the meeting with the Penobscot Nation. So the way I understand it is we're going to start at 4 with them and then move into some work on the ordinance. We'll take the next step with face coverings and COVID prevention and an update there.
Yep.
Just to clarify, that is
So-
next Monday, correct?
Next Monday. Yep.
17th.
And I will also at that point, hopefully have some more detailed information about the bond refunding, to be able to begin to move that forward as well. Talked about the meeting with the university and community leaders, talked about my idea for the letter to the governor. The only other piece, I have started laying out potential meetings through the end of the calendar year, so the end of December. My thought was that we would stay in the Zoom universe unless things change dramatically, or as soon as the governor lets the state of emergency lapse. It's my understanding that we then do not have the authority to hold public meetings in this platform. So it's kind of, we've got to pay attention. But my thought would be that we would keep it on the Zoom platform till the end of December, or the expiration of our authority under statute to hold meetings like this, whichever one comes first. Essentially, you guys might want to talk a little bit amongst yourself about our meeting schedule, but we are, right now, it looks like just about every Monday and every Thursday we have something going on. So that's busy. But I will put out a proposed schedule and you guys can let me know what you think about it. And I also have little tool for committee chairs and the council chair that I'm going to share, that is an internal tool that we're using to schedule agenda items. So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. So I think that's it. It feels like today has been a pretty gnarly day. I had one plan when I came in and the day kind of quickly got away from me. So hopefully it will settle down for tomorrow.
Good.
Good. All right. So future agenda items, items of concern. Cheryl, do you have any? No? Lori? Sam?
No, just appreciation for all the hard work everybody's doing, especially with this pandemic and the COVID situation.
Mm-hmm. Tom?
Ditto.
Megan?
Only that I forgot that at our last meeting, did we not talk about potentially, well, it's past the point now, but making a note of the fact that there's a public hearing next month for the marijuana stuff. We talked about pulling it off to consent so we could talk about it, and then things got away from us. But just to let the public know that that was on the consent agenda. We do have that public hearing. We're interested in
Feedback.
My thought with that, where that's such a big issue that many people have strong opinions about, I'm gonna be looking at the potential of a postcard with the public hearing date to go out. I figure if I could do part of the postcard with the public hearing date and then a little tagline about COVID-19, we could get the message out to everybody.
Could we also publish maybe that there would be a comment period? Could we leave just in, because I don't know how many people we can get through on a public hearing on Zoom.
Oh, yeah. So what you're saying is hold the public hearing like we normally would. There will be a month. So you guys will have several weeks that you can take public comment and make it part of the public record as part of your decision. Sure.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's smart.
And Terry, I didn't forget you. You just got.
I'm good. I have nothing.
Okay. Public petitions, I don't think we have any. Is there any public on? No. Okay. No public comments. Then I will take a motion for adjournment
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
All right, by show of hands, I'll take adjournment. All those in favor? All right. We are all leaving. Have a great evening, everyone. Looks like it's
Thank you,
about to
Cindy.
rain.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Good
It's
night.
out there.